Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, if you ever feel like the world is just perpetually running on a treadmill, making a whole lot of noise, but not really
Oh,
getting anywhere.
oh, absolutely. Especially politically, socially.
Exactly. Well, if that resonates, then this deep dive is specifically for you. We're going to set aside all that external noise today to really analyze a truly profound metaphysical perspective from Dr. Roy E. Richmond.
It's from his article, The Greater Turning Point, a call to awakened awareness.
And our mission today is, I think, pretty essential. We're diving into the core argument of a really celebrated expert who, he looks at all this massive global energy being poured into movements.
Political revolutions, religious surges, you name it.
Right. And he argues that fundamentally, humanity is still missing the point, the essential foundational turning point.
He basically suggests we're all looking for the solution in the symptom,
Yeah.
instead of actually addressing the cause.
Okay, so let's unpack that premise because it really requires acknowledging what's happening right now. Dr. Roy, he starts by admitting the world is, well, undeniably stirred up.
You can't miss it. It's this massive surge of energy, and yeah, it's often quite volatile. It's all calling for entirely new directions.
And he specifically points to the rapidly expanding turning point surge. This is the movement that gained, global notoriety after its founder's tragic assassination. It's just drawing in huge numbers of followers.
It's a really powerful magnetic force, and Dr. Roy is very clear about this.
Hmm.
These movements aren't populated by, malicious or ignorant people.
Yeah.
Not at all.
No, he says good people.
Good people, honest people, and people who are genuinely awakened to the dysfunction of earthly systems. They're the ones getting involved.
They can feel that the current structures are just rotten.
Yeah, and they are deeply, passionately fueled by this desire to reclaim what they see as lost values. They know the system is broken. They're not wrong about that.
And that is such a critical setup. They see the dysfunction, they want to reclaim values, and they're looking for hope.
Externally.
Exactly. But this is where Dr. Roy introduces his central concern. It's really the hook for his entire argument.
And the concern is this. While so many are rushing toward these new external movements, looking for hope and a new path, he says millions are simultaneously being pulled right back into what he calls an old religious system.
And in his view, that system is just profoundly damaging.
Because it's based entirely on what he calls mistaken awareness.
Okay, we need to pause right there and define what he means by that old system, because it's really the direct opposite of the truth he's trying to advocate for. What are the defining features of that damaging structure?
Well, he says it's characterized by three core, and I'd say toxic pillars. First, the constant promotion of penal substitution.
Penal substitution.
Yeah, it's this theological idea that, human error or sin created some kind of cosmic debt, and that a penalty had to be exacted to appease an angry or offended deity.
Which immediately shifts the entire relationship into something legal, something transactional instead of, relational.
Exactly. And the second pillar is fear-based atonement. The idea that if the payment wasn't made, or if you don't accept the payment in just the right way,
The consequences are dire.
often eternal punishment. And the third, which is maybe the most subtle, is the insistence on conditional divine love. It's the message, and he paraphrases it directly from the source material, that says, Elohim loves you, but you must follow these specific rules, doctrines, or rituals to stay loved.
The but, there's always a but. So the foundation of this whole religious system is fear, debt, and conditions. And right away, Dr. Roy sets up this radical contrast. He introduces the concepts that really anchor his idea of a true turning point.
Yeah, the contrast is, it's absolute. He asserts that the truth is unconditional love and compassionate union with the breath, and that this resides permanently in our sacred self.
Okay, we have to unpack that jargon right now or we're going to lose people for the rest of this deep dive.
Agreed. Let's do it.
So when he talks about Elohim, he's referring to the infinite, universal, divine source. Is that right?
That's right, the source of all being.
And when he uses the term breath always, with a capital B, what specific concept is he pointing to there?
So the breath, which you might see in other traditions as ruach or pneuma, it's the animating life force. It's not just the air in your lungs.
Right.
It's the immediate, non-physical intelligence and sustenance that flows through all of creation. It's the life in your body, the mind in your consciousness. It's the governing force of the universe, and it is inseparable from Elohim. It's the divine presence made immediate and manifest right here, within us.
And then the sacred self. This seems to be the really crucial distinction from, our everyday personality or our ego.
Precisely. The sacred self is your true eternal identity. It's that part of you that is inherently whole, perfect, and eternally in union with the breath and Elohim.
So it's not the ego.
Not at all. It's not the personality that's been shaped by external fears or inherited trauma or what society expects of you. The sacred self is your unchangeable divine core.
Okay, so if that unconditional eternal union is the actual truth, then the entire concept of a transactional, fear-based religious system is built on, well, a fundamental lie about our very nature.
It's built in a fundamental lie of separation. And that brings us to his powerful thesis, where he defines the true turning point. He is absolutely crystal clear. It is not political, it is not religious in that old sense, and is certainly not a revival of nationalism or some kind of denominational loyalty.
This is where he brings in that key phrase, an awareness turning.
Yes, the true turning point is an awareness turning. It's an inner reorientation, a fundamental shift in perception where we turn away from the mistaken beliefs we've inherited from all those external systems and we reorient to the truth, the union, that is already whole and present within every single sacred self.
So the mission isn't to change the world's external systems first.
No. The mission is to change the operating system of consciousness itself.
All right, let's dive deeper into that inner reorientation in part one, because this is where Dr. Roy really lays the metaphysical foundation for change. If the political rally or the religious service isn't where the solution is, where does the real shift actually happen?
And Dr. Roy is, he's quite radical here. He asserts that the actual turning point that humanity so desperately needs will never come from campaigns or elections or these huge external religious gatherings or policy debates.
Why not?
Because all of those activities are happening within the systems that are already defined by the mistaken awareness. They're just chasing external symptoms. It's like trying to fix a faulty program by just clicking the buttons harder.
I like that analogy. So he argues that the change has to come from a mass awakening to the voice of the breath within.
That's it. That's the internal authority replacing the external one. And the shift is, well, it's seismic. It's about moving people from a state of inherited fear, that's the fear passed down through religious and social conditioning, and moving them into a conscious, living awareness of their eternal union with Elohim.
So it's a shift in identity.
It's the whole ballgame. This transition from a fear-based identity, the ego, to a union-based identity, the sacred self. That's the engine of the greater turning point.
But to really get the power of this union, we have to grasp the core truth about separation that the Source just hammers home again and again. It feels like the ultimate correction to that whole penal substitution theology.
This is the central metaphysical truth that just fundamentally resets the entire conversation about our relationship with the divine. The Source states it emphatically. Elohim never separated from mankind.
Oh, wow. Okay, so if the divine never left, never withdrew, then the distance we feel, that pervasive sense of being broken or flawed that so many people carry, it has to be an illusion.
It's entirely perceptual. And this is the crucial clarification. Mankind separated in awareness. The separation isn't ontological. It's not real in its essence. It's a trick of the light, a perceptual error. And this separation in our awareness is, according to Dr. Roy, the root cause of every single global dysfunction we're seeing right now.
We build systems that reflect our mistaken belief in separation.
You can't help it. And this belief has been actively maintained and, you could say, weaponized, especially by religious structures.
So?
Well, Dr. Roy argues that traditional religion has perpetuated this perceptual separation by convincing generations of people that they were born inherently flawed, sinful, and unacceptable, unworthy of divine presence unless
someone or something appeased Elohim on their behalf.
Right. The whole concept of our inherent deficiency becomes institutionalized. It becomes the bedrock of the entire system.
Which leads us directly to his radical reinterpretation of the consecrated messenger, Jesus.
Yeah.
Because if that foundational premise of human deficiency is false, then the traditional role assigned to him, that of a sacrificial payment, it has to be false too.
The Source just completely challenges that narrative built on debt and wrath. Dr. Roy states it clearly. The consecrated messenger did not come to appease a wrathful deity, nor did he offer some kind of payment to Elohim for human errors.
So that whole concept of penal substitution,
it's rejected. He sees it as a byproduct of our mistaken awareness. It's a story we told ourselves because we believed we were separate and flawed.
So if his mission wasn't about payment, what was it truly about?
His actual mission was threefold, and was entirely focused on revelation, not transaction. First, to reveal the Logos life, the perfect divine blueprint that is already present and functioning in all of mankind.
Okay, so revealing what's already there.
Exactly. Second, to show the way of living as a sacred self, operating in full conscious awareness of the breath. And third, and this is the most important part, his mission was to unveil identity, not offer payment. He was demonstrating what humanity already was, not what humanity needed to buy back.
That is a fundamental reversal. I mean, that changes everything. It shifts the entire focus from an external transaction to an internal demonstration. So what were the specific shifts in consciousness that this demonstration was supposed to bring about?
The purpose was to turn the world's consciousness away from that old external matrix. The transformation was meant to be from fear to freedom, from relying on ritual to embracing reality, and from a life of religious obedience to one of awakened living. It was the blueprint for rebooting the human operating system.
So the consecrated messenger was fundamentally a change agent for consciousness, not the founder of a new external religious structure.
Precisely. And we bring all this back to the present moment. Dr. Roy's conclusion is humanity needs so much more than just another political climate shift. We need this foundational awareness correction. Because if the core misunderstanding remains,
The mistaken identity, the belief in separation.
then every single external change is ultimately going to fail. It'll just recycle the old dysfunction in new clothing.
Which sets us up perfectly for the next part of this deep dive, getting into the systems themselves. If this belief in separation is the single root error, how has it managed to corrupt the entire infrastructure of our world?
Well, this is where it gets really practical. Dr. Roy argues that the entire Earth experience, the whole matrix we inhabit, is shaped by 5 primary interconnected systems. And they have all operated under this exact same mistaken awareness for centuries.
And this is the critical distinction, right? He's not arguing that they're failing because of corruption or bad policies, even though those are certainly symptoms.
No, not at the root. His argument is that these systems are not broken because they lack sophisticated policies or, good intentions. They are fundamentally broken because they lack awareness. They're built upon the lie of separation and fear, which means their core operating assumptions are inherently flawed.
Which leads to dysfunction no matter who's in charge.
Exactly. It's a feature, not a bug, of the current system.
That's a massive claim. Let's start with the one that's on everyone's mind right now. System 1, the political system. What is its inherent mistaken awareness?
It's entirely built upon fear, manipulation, and the illusion of separation. I mean, just think about the symptoms. Political discourse is almost entirely defined by polarization.
It's us versus them. One party versus another, one nation versus another.
Always. Your political identity is defined by what you are struggling against, not what you are aligned with. The whole system thrives on conflict and the fear of the other.
So if that separation and fear are the very foundation, then it doesn't matter how many elections we hold. We're just exchanging one manifestation of fear for another. So what is the correction? How does awareness actually change politics?
The correction is radical because it redefines the very idea of government. Dr. Roy states that true government is not external power structures or mandates. The correction is recognizing that true government is the governing life of the breath moving through awakened sacred selves.
Okay, but what does that actually look like? What does governing by the breath look like in a real-world scenario? I'm picturing a politician sitting in quiet meditation, but then they still have to pass a budget and negotiate foreign treaties. How does that inner union translate into functional policy?
That's a great question. It translates through integrity and, maybe more importantly, non-reaction. When a person governs from their sacred self, in union with the breath, they're operating from a place of innate wisdom and unconditional inclusion.
So their decisions stop being reactive.
Exactly. They stop being driven by fear of the opposition or fear of losing the next election. They start being proactive, guided by the highest good of the whole.
Right.
There is no other to defeat anymore. There are only citizens to serve, and all of them are carrying the same breath.
So the implication then is that without this conscious awareness rising up in the individuals who hold power, our political systems are just doomed to recycle the same old narratives. The faces and the party logos might change, but the foundational fear and the scarcity mentality remain, which just guarantees more conflict.
Absolutely. Any external movement that just wants to replace one set of fearful people with another set of fearful people is doomed to repeat the cycle of dysfunction. The real power of the change comes from the internal alignment of the individual, which then can't help but permeate their actions in the world.
All right, let's move to system 2, the religious system. We've touched on this already, but why does Dr. Roy view it as a systemic failure even when so many people find comfort and moral structure there?
Because its primary function, structurally speaking, is to control awareness. He argues it remains one of the strongest forces in the world, precisely because it leverages and, in a way, weaponizes inherited fear.
The toxic doctrines we talked about earlier?
Penal substitution, the threat of eternal punishment, the transactional God. These beliefs create a very powerful compliance mechanism.
And if compliance is mandated by fear, then the system is basically perpetuating the very separation it claims it can solve.
Precisely. It creates this hierarchical, conditional reality where the individual is always dependent on the external structure, the priest, the dogma, the ritual, to maintain their acceptable status before Elohim. It makes the divine something external and conditional.
So what's the required correction here?
The turning point requires a radical release from all these old interpretations and a deep dive into the absolute truth of union.
So letting go of the entire story that mankind is deficient.
Yes, letting go of the idea that we're sinful and unacceptable and spiritually impoverished. Instead, we have to embrace the reality that we are perfect expressions of the divine mind, animated by the breath.
So the correction is essentially a total deconstruction of the need for an intermediary. If I am eternally one with the breath, I don't need anyone to intervene on my behalf.
That's the entire shift in authority. And that realization completely undercuts the power structure of any religious system built on conditional access or external mediation. The access is internal, it's immediate, and it's unconditional. The correction means moving from performing a religious duty to simply living from an awakened reality.
Let's move on to System 3, the medical system. This is an interesting one because this is where the metaphysical perspective can often clash with what feels like objective physical reality. Why is the medical system on this list of systems corrupted by separation?
Well, Dr. Roy argues that fear is the foundational operating principle of medical culture, particularly in the West. The mistaken awareness is the belief that our bodies are just fragile mechanisms, separate from our life source, destined to deteriorate, and critically dependent only on external, often invasive intervention for any kind of healing or maintenance.
I can see the link to separation there. If we believe that the body is just a machine that's separate from its animating force, we're going to treat it mechanistically. We just wait for it to break down.
That's the metaphysical error. We are taught to be hypervigilant for disease, rather than conscious of life. The entire focus is on pathology and deficiency.
But, if I break my leg, I still need a surgeon and external intervention. How does the correction apply here practically without, advocating for a reckless disregard of medical science?
And the correction isn't about ignoring doctors. It's about shifting the entire relationship with our own bodies. The realization is that every single cell is animated by the breath of life. This means the body is not merely a biological machine. It is a direct manifestation of the Logos life. Healing, then, becomes not just about external treatments, but about aligning our consciousness with the inherent, perfect, self-sustaining life force that's already present.
So the awareness correction releases people from a fear-based dependency. Instead of running to the doctor from a place of panic about inevitable decay, you approach health from a place of affirming your identity as a life being, not a disease being.
Exactly. The shift is so subtle, but it's profound. It moves from waiting for an external intervention to activate healing to consciously collaborating with the intelligent breath that is already sustaining the body. It changes how you think about wellness, about aging, about recovery. The ultimate authority shifts back to the conscious, unified self.
All right, let's tackle System 4, the financial system. This is arguably the most universal system we have. If we apply this rule of separation, what is its central and mistaken awareness?
In one word, scarcity. Dr. Roy is unequivocal about this. Scarcity is the dominant defining theme of global economics, but he states that scarcity is fundamentally not real. It's a psychological construct built entirely upon the illusion of separation. If you believe you are separate from your source and separate from your neighbor, then you automatically believe resources are finite and that they require competition, hoarding, and defensive accumulation.
Okay, this is where I have to push back a little just to play devil's advocate. We do have finite resources, right? We have a limited amount of oil, limited fresh water, limited time in a day. How can Dr. Roy claim scarcity is just a construct when we face real physical limitations like resource depletion or population density?
That's a crucial question, and the source distinguishes between psychological scarcity and physical limitation. Psychological scarcity, the mistaken awareness, is the belief that there isn't enough. which is what forces conflict and inefficient allocation. The correction states that supply flows from the divine mind through the logos life within us.
What does that mean exactly?
It means that the awareness correction changes the mechanism of supply. Instead of scrambling and struggling for a piece of what you perceive to be a limited pie, the awakened sacred self aligns with the infinite resourcefulness of the divine mind.
So it's not like gold just magically appears in your pocket.
No, but it means that ideas, opportunities, innovations, and the means to efficiently utilize and share resources begin to flow freely. It dissolves the competitive need to hoard. True prosperity becomes relational, not purely quantitative.
He also redefines prosperity, connecting it directly to that internal alignment.
Yes, he redefines prosperity as the outward expression of inward conscious alignment with the breath. So it shifts from being a metric of how much external wealth you've accumulated to being a reflection of your internal wholeness and alignment. When you operate from a place of union, lack is a perceptual impossibility because you are connected to the source of all.
Okay. Finally, we come to System 5, the social system. The mistaken awareness here seems to be the most obvious manifestation of separation in our daily lives.
It is. It's the easiest one to observe because it just manifests as raw division. Division thrives where identity is mistaken. Racism, class conflict, gender conflict, aggressive nationalism, all of these deep societal divisions grow directly from the illusion that we are separate sacred selves with separate origins or, different intrinsic worth.
So the social system mistakes the external wrapper, skin color, bank account, passport for the internal shared reality.
Exactly. The moment we identify ourselves or others by those egoic external trappings, we create the platform for conflict.
The systems of hierarchy and oppression can't exist without that belief.
They can't. They can't exist without the belief that one person's sacred self is somehow superior or inferior to another's. It's a fundamental error in awareness about our shared nature.
Therefore, the correction that's required by the turning point must be the simplest and yet the most revolutionary.
It is. The turning point calls for the recognition that all sacred selves carry the same breath, the same divine mind, same source of being. When this awareness is corrected, the foundational logic that fuels prejudice and conflict it collapses instantly. When you see the same divine essence in the other, separation becomes impossible, and social harmony is the inevitable outcome of that internal recognition.
What's really staggering as we finish part 2 is how Dr. Roy argues that these 5 huge, seemingly disconnected structures, our government, our faith, our health, our money, and our relationships, are all fundamentally corrupted by that single, simple misunderstanding, the belief in separation from the breath.
It simplifies the problem set completely, doesn't it?
It does. It shifts the entire struggle from fighting all these external battles, policy against policy, rally against rally, to engaging in a single internal correction of consciousness.
If you correct the awareness, the systemic manifestations of separation naturally begin to crumble and realign on their own.
This brings us to the mechanism of change described in part 3. We have to really clearly distinguish between the movements the world is chasing right now and the awareness that Dr. Roy is advocating for.
That distinction is paramount because it really addresses longevity and permanence. Dr. Roy contrasts the temporal nature of all these external movements. Political movements, they rise and fall.
Religious fads burn bright and then they just fade away.
Exactly. Nations cycle through prosperity and decline. They're all temporary solutions to what are perpetual symptoms.
But awareness is eternal.
Yes, and therefore awareness is where the true turning point must happen. Only an eternal shift, a shift at the level of consciousness, can produce an eternal, lasting correction in the world's operating reality. Anything based on external policy or a political victory or dogmatic control is inherently temporary and subject to entropy.
He makes a really powerful distinction about what the world needs next. He says the world does not need another revival, it needs a revelation.
And revival, by its very definition, implies returning to an old, state-re-energizing outdated doctrines, bringing back some terminal fervor. A revelation implies seeing something entirely new, or, perhaps seeing the fundamental truth that was always there but was completely forgotten.
Humanity doesn't need a return to old doctrines.
It needs a restoration of forgotten truth.
And the political implications of that are huge. The world doesn't need a slightly better political party. It needs awakened sacred selves governing their world from union with the breath. That's the entire shift of authority.
It moves the idea of government from being a defensive mechanism, a set of rules to police flawed, sinful, separated beings, to being an expansive, creative mechanism that's driven by inherent wisdom. The individual who is consciously aligned with the breath operates with an inner government that supersedes the need for external control or manipulation, which is what defines the flawed system.
So let's synthesize the desired outcomes here. If this inner shift occurs on a mass scale, if this awareness turning really takes hold, what are the specific transformative outcomes?
Dr. Roy outlines the transformation as fourfold. First, he says it restores sight to the blind, which means it removes the perceptual error of separation.
Okay.
Second, it stills the chaos of the earthly systems, because that chaos is just a reflection of internal conflict being projected outward. Third, it heals the mistaken identity of mankind, restoring the knowledge of the sacred self. And fourth, it unveils the Logos life as the true functioning, sustaining power of the world.
That's a radical redefinition of global potential. It's not just tweaking the system, it's building a completely new one based on a higher reality.
It is, and it brings us right back to the core thesis, which is the prerequisite for all global change. The greater turning point is within.
So, if the world is going to shift, awareness has to shift. If systems are going to heal, sacred selves have to awaken. Dr. Roy puts the entire burden of correction on the individual's internal work.
The change in our political, religious, and social structures will only occur because individuals, en masse, begin to hear the breath within instead of being pulled around by the noise without. The internal authority has to overcome the external noise. And this makes the change inherently stable and self-sustaining because it originates from the eternal core of our being.
So let's just nail down the final, definitive understanding of the true turning point, clarifying what it is not and what it is. We've established it is not based on fear, anger, nationalism, or religious zeal.
Right. Instead, it is a movement of awakening that is defined by 5 specific realizations. It is an awakening to the truth of
First, who we have always been.
recognizing the eternal, whole, sacred self, which is unchanging in its perfection.
Second, who Elohim has always been in us.
And that's about recognizing the non-transactional, unconditional, and inseparable presence of the divine source. Those 2 points right there define the relationship of eternal union,
Okay, third, the restoration of the sacred self.
which is reclaiming that inherent, uncorrupted identity from all the fear and programming of the ego.
Fourth, the unveiling of the breath as our life.
Recognizing that immediate, animating, intelligent life force as the reality of our being, rather than viewing the body as some separate, fragile mechanism.
And fifth, the reclamation of the divine mind as our true consciousness.
And that's replacing limited, fearful, scarcity-based thinking with infinite, resourceful, unconditional awareness. That whole sequence provides the entire roadmap for the metaphysical process Dr. Roy is describing. And this emphasis on the internal, the immediate, and the unconditional nature of reality is what makes this turning point truly greater. It's not limited by time or geography or the political climate.
This entire deep dive really challenges the fundamental human urge to fix the outside world first. It requires us to completely reevaluate where we put our energy. And Dr. Roy brings it all back to this intensely practical starting point. It begins not out there, but in here.
And this internal shift, it's happening constantly, moment by moment. It happens in your inner conversation, in the quality of your awareness, in the conscious remembrance of your eternal union with Elohim Ruach breath.
So this inner conversation becomes the true engine of the global turning point. It's that governing body we were talking about earlier.
Absolutely. It is the space where the awakened self speaks. Conscious awareness listens, the divine mind illuminates the path of alignment, and the breath empowers the action of conscious living. This is the foundation that will not fade or fracture or fail, because it is rooted in the eternal.
This means that if you want a better political system, you first have to correct the governing system of your own consciousness. If you want a more equitable financial system, you have to first eliminate scarcity from your own internal narrative.
It's the ultimate self-deterministic model for global correction. We've spent this entire deep dive exploring Dr. Roy's sweeping claim that the entire Earth experience is shaped by 5 primary systems that have operated under the same mistaken awareness for centuries.
So we want to leave you, the listener, with this final provocative thought, connecting all this profound metaphysical work back to your daily life. If the political, financial, and medical systems are fundamentally broken not by policy, but by an internal lack of awareness, by the belief in separation, what is one external fix that you currently pursue?
Is it a diet to conquer what you believe is a fragile body? Is it an aggressive savings plan to conquer scarcity? Or maybe it's political activism driven by fear of the other.
What single external struggle in your life might be instantly solved by an inner awareness correction instead?
Where is your belief in separation manifesting as struggle in your life right now? That realization, that's the starting line for your own personal greater turning point.
Think about that. Thank you for joining us on the deep dive.
We look forward to the next shift in awareness.